So watching this documentary, I could say it was definitely detail detail provide a great deal of overview of the systematic racial injustices that still occur in the United States to this day. The documentary discusses the policies that were put in place by different administrations, such as the Nixon administration, the Reagans, how George H.W. Bush ran off the war on drugs, and how the war on drugs and the crime bill were really used to target black people. In a lot of ways, this was used to keep blacks in the prison population, and the policies were meant to target primarily black men because it was stated in the 13th Amendment that prohibited slavery and forced labor, excluding punishment for crimes. Excluding punishment for crimes. That's even mentioned in the film Lincoln, too, when they signed the 13th Amendment, which is where, especially down south after the Civil War, they targeted young men for crimes such as littering and locked them up to perform servant work. While watching the documentary, I saw the stuff they talked about with Nixon, Reagan, Trump. The New York Six, where 6 young black men were convicted of rape, teenagers, for rape they did not commit. And Donald Trump put a letter in the paper to try and help get them convicted. And you have Kalief Browder, who was accused of petty theft as a teen, sent to Rikers Island, where he was beaten on a repeated basis. He was battered and bruised so much he attempted suicide several times while he was there for the crime he never committed. But he did eventually end up committing suicide after being released. And there are documentaries on Netflix about the New York Six, When They See Us, and the Kalief Browder story on Netflix, which talk about those incidents particularly more in detail. And it shows how the system has locked up young black men for crimes they did not commit, and where they get left to get treated like thugs. They basically get beaten and maimed when they should have never been there in the first place. And I remember in school as a kid, I was taught that racism died in the 50s and 60s, and basically that MLK saved the country from racism and all that bullshit. And the reason it's bullshit is because we still have institutional racism going on to this day, as displayed in the documentary, from the war on drugs to the Trayvon Martin shooting to George Floyd, which we still see those incidents happening. With the George Floyd case, it was a traffic violation. Or don't forget, Philando Castile, who was legally armed. He informed the cop who pulled him over for the tail lamp that he had a registered firearm, which, according to the law, the way you're supposed to do so, exactly as the law states. And the cop that pulled him over basically executed him right on the spot. And all these incidents and the memories of how frustrated I was started coming back while watching it. And, I remember at the time, I could not believe the excuses they would make, especially with Philando Castile, who was lawfully armed. And you had the crime bill and all the other things that have been done post-civil rights that have allowed this to continue, the Post-Civil Rights Act. And they've created a system that has allowed institutional racism to continue. I mean, I started to become aware of this, that we were not living in a post-racial society with the George Zimmerman incident, all the police brutality incidents, and being more aware of the sentences that were given to black men for crimes they did not commit, or petty crimes where they were given 30 to 40 years in life opposed to their white counterparts. And the documentary 13 shed light on a lot of this, and it got me to think about so many things that I can just go on about this. And I will say this, the Brock Turner incident, where he was given, I believe it was 3 months for a rape that he committed, that he was caught committing. Meanwhile, people that committed nonviolent crimes, nonviolent drug offenses, especially non-white, particularly, they were given 20 years to life. Meanwhile, the white man born into a rich family gets 3 months for a rape that he was caught committing. And there's so much I could talk about that this documentary made me start thinking about again. But one thing I did not mention in the first part that was mentioned in the documentary was the Black Panther movement and how leaders were executed or having bogus charges placed against them in some cases. One example was Fred Hampton. He was killed at a raid at 4 o'clock in the morning, basically dictator, KKK, or mafia-style execution. The man who was part of the movement, the fight against racial injustice, was executed for taking a stand against it. This is one example of how far they've gone to protect their system, how white supremacy is ingrained into the systems. Elements of white supremacy are still ingrained into the system to this day. I mean, I could say so much about this, mean, I'll have to continue talking about racial injustices and the subject matter as a whole in other videos, but to summarize everything, this documentary, 13th, will serve as a reminder that institutional racism is still alive in our society in 2020. And all the things discussed from the Nixon, Reagan, Trump, crime bills, crackdown on civil rights movements, and more, it will, and what everything else they talk about, it will inspire people. Hell, even other people, such as myself, white people, to stand up to white supremacy and to stand up for black rights. And I'll leave it at that. Nikki Stees signing off. Like, comment, subscribe. And I'll definitely talk more about white supremacy and black issues and racism issues still going on citing other videos. Nikki Stees is now officially signing off. See you next time.